Hello and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, inspirational author, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. Find out more at RachelFlick.com. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Today I'm bringing you part 2 of my interview with Sharon Engram and her daughter Lori Rohlinger, both of whom have been widowed. Lori's husband of 21 years died of a neurological disorder, and Sharon's husband of 60 years passed away from an unexpected aggressive cancer. Sharon Engram was active in 3 churches. Her late husband Don pastored in Illinois, Ohio, and Arizona. As a speaker, women's ministry leader, and Bible study teacher, she also helped found Women Anew, an annual conference for women which has reached thousands of ladies. Sharon's heart also expands into international missions. She helped develop the Women's Ministry Division for International Needs, assisting national women leaders in ministering to their own people. As part of that ministry, Sharon organized several women's teams to teach at women's conferences in third world countries. She also served on the board of directors for World Ventures Missions. Mother of 4, grandmother of 14, and great-grandmother of 6, Sharon lives in Goodyear, Arizona. Lori Rohlinger was active alongside her late husband Greg in founding Palm Valley Church in Arizona, seeing growth to over 4,000 worshipers. The couple was an inspiring team, he at the 2013 C3 Conference for Pastors in Dallas, and she at Just One Virtual Conference in 2014 and 2016. Lori also spoke at the in-person Flourish Conference in 2017. She lives in Buckeye, Arizona, and is the mother of 3 young adult sons and 1 teenage daughter. Lori writes a blog and does a weekly podcast, Beautifully Broken, about widowed life. Learn more at lorirohlinger.blogspot.com. Sharon and Lori, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of the Hopecast.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
So
It's
happy
wonderful.
to be here. Mm-hmm.
You guys are so just radiant, luminous with your stories. I can tell that you've allowed the Lord to have access to your hearts and your pain. It's a very distinct thing that I've come to see in other widows when they really turn over the pain and the content of their story and allow the Lord to work in their hearts. And I see it on both of your faces, and pain notwithstanding, right? It hasn't been a perfect story by a long shot. And in our last episode, you were sharing your stories of loss and the ends of life for both of your husbands and kind of relating to one another in that. And so one of the things that has come out of your loss is you taking on a project together and writing a book. So would you guys tell the Hopecast listeners about what has come from your loss and what you've created in that process?
Well, I think that we discussed it last time, how we grieve differently. And I definitely went to scripture and then my keyboard to kind of do therapy for me. And my mom runs 2 books. So she was reading, trying to find any devotional or book from a widow. But what we both learned, because I had received books on grief and things like that, and I looked at them and they were overwhelming. And I thought, oh my goodness, I can't sit and read somebody else's grief and pile that on top of my own grief. And she had found the same thing. She had, had read some things, and then some books on grief were not by a widow. And so, they're still good, but maybe not exactly what she was looking for. So I was already blogging and podcasting, and she came to me and said, I think we need to write a book because there's nothing out there specifically that I'm finding, and it has to be short and it has to be something that's not intimidating. And I agreed 100%. So I took what God had poured into me about the hope, and she took her knowledge of what she was looking for, and we kind of combined it to make this little book. So go ahead, Mom.
Yes, that's what I was just searching, like Lori said. But I will say shortly after my husband had passed, COVID hit our country. And so we were in lockdown. So that was an interesting thing, because now I'm in this house, in this loneliness, really, because I like people. And I wasn't one to actually want to hibernate. That's where Lori and I did a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
I like my friends, and I like to be out and about. And I kept up with some ministry things, after a few months of leading and all. And then I got locked down, and it was forced, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I was in that, I had an opportunity to attend a virtual conference online. I thought, well, why not? I'm here alone. I'll just set up my...
You're like, I have a little time.
I have a little time. So I, registered for that. And it was writers and speakers. And, I just kind of had my own little time of worship and praise, crying and just hearing God's voice. And that's where I began to kind of just feel this thing I was searching for. I felt him just nudge me. If you can't find what you think would have helped you, why don't you think about writing? And so I thought, that's it. Because I love the scriptures. And so what we did then, I did say to Lori after a while, I prayed about that. And I thought, you know what? My daughter is also a widow. Maybe we could do this together. And it would be a perspective from a younger widow and then the older widow. So then she said, well, let me pray about it. And then we decided to make it small, bite-sized, because, as a widow,
Trauma
there's
brain,
that
widow brain.
fog. I call it fog. Just, you can't think. You can't concentrate. It's hard to make decisions. And that's why we just need something that's small. But I wanted scripture, and I wanted to hear what another widow had walked through, to give me hope that I could make it. And so that's really kind of how we laid our book out. And we basically just, we've taken just things that touch our lives. Like we talked about tears, and how tears are such really a gift from the Lord. They're healing, they're healing. And so we just took practical things: joy, grief, change. Talked about how our lives are so changed. Talked about trust, thankfulness, so many small little things, and then wrote a story with it around the scripture. Have a prayer, have a perspective, and then we give a widow. Actually, I've had widowers tell me that they get a lot out of this book, and there's a place to journal. So we say to the widow in the beginning of that book, if you don't feel like you want to write a thing, maybe put a little check mark. You'll know you read it. And then if you go back a couple months later, you might be ready to write a sentence of your heart on that paper. So that's how we laid it out. We laid it out as a small little gift book, so it could just lay by their bed. And it may lay there for quite a while before they went and pick it up.
I feel attacked, Sharon. I feel like that there's a stack of books by my bed right now.
I know. But you know what? If they're I couldn't read chapter books. I wasn't ready for them. So these little devotions are just small, really bite-sized.
I sense so much grace in the creation of your book, because widow brain, trauma brain is so real. And the way that we have to disconnect in some ways in order to process our pain, and also, take it in waves that don't absolutely collapse us. Everything is different. And I said, I thought about when you were telling us your story last week in part 1 of this example, that I just had a picture of myself being dropped off in China. I was paraplegic, and it was in a country where I didn't speak the language. So it was like I didn't have my legs, I couldn't communicate, and I didn't know where I was. And that's how becoming a widow felt like to me, was I was supposed to navigate my life without my core ability to ambulate and communicate. And that's how lost I felt. And so when you say that you created this book and it's small and it's not a complex treatise on trauma and grief and loss, but instead a way that you have come around those who are grieving with just an embrace and a space for them to process. And if they don't have capacity to process, then just do a little check mark and tell yourself that's where you're at. Like, all of that just has so much grace and compassion for what happens to our brains and our bodies in grief and loss. And I feel your intentionality in the creation of that.
Thank you. Yeah, because honestly, I felt like I needed something, but I wanted it from another widow because that gave me hope. She's ahead of me and she's making it, and that's why I felt like this was something that perhaps we could write to encourage other widows coming behind us. All ages.
And we're really not trying to wrap a bow around the process of widowhood. You can't wrap a bow. You can't make it all neat and tidy. It's messy. Mom writes this beautiful thing about tears, but I actually did a blog called "Does God Keep the Snot?" Because
Good. I love it already. I haven't read it, but I love it.
That's not in the devotional, but because that's the real and the raw.
Yeah.
Tears, when I think of tears, I think of Demi Moore during Ghost, where she has that single tear running down her beautiful face. And I'm like, no, I've got rosacea and blotchiness and everything is running. And, okay, so the tears are important, but does he keep the snot as well? Because that's the real and raw.
Do you see the ugly?
Widowhood.
Do you see the hard?
Yeah.
Do you see the brokenness in my tears?
Yeah. So, the devotionals are not meant to be like this picture perfect.
No.
We do share personal stories. However, there is hope. And that's what we try to communicate, a scripture a day, like hope for today. And some days that's just what we need.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that one of the core themes of your book is to accept comfort from others. And I find in my writing the things that motivate me to encourage and share hope stories are experiences. So do you guys have an experience that motivated you to create that as a theme, to accept comfort from others?
Well, I have an amazing group of girlfriends that, they're the kind of friends that you can call at 3 a.m. sobbing. And, you can just say, don't speak anything, just sit here and listen to me cry and cry with me, that no expectation, because, if we're being honest, there are no words you can say to the grieving heart. There's nothing deep enough that's going to satisfy that. But just being present and just being there and being somebody who will, I think of Job too. His friends just sat there and cried with him. And there's healing in that somebody, they might not be experiencing what I'm experiencing, but they are with me in this grief journey. And that's been so impactful. The widow, I feel like, needs a core group of either family, friends, church people, whoever it is, to come around them and not try to heal them, but just be with them as they walk through this grief.
Yeah, friendship has been huge for me. I have long distance friends who call me. One of them called me every day, those first few. I just knew she cared. And I could cry if I could just pour out to her. And she so understood. And then, as I said, when we were in COVID, I had a couple of friends that said, you know what, we have to see each other. And like I said, I'm a person that likes to be with people. So we met at the one gal's, she lives very close to me, but we met in her driveway. And we had our lawn chairs and we put them 6 feet apart because you had to do that, you know. And
Bless it. I love. Oh
I
my
know,
gosh.
remember those days? Oh my word. Yeah, you couldn't touch each other, you know, you couldn't hug, you couldn't do anything, but you could see and you could talk. And so we named ourselves the Driveway Divas, and we met we met every week.
Oh.
And you know what? It was so good because it was just girl stuff. And I needed that. I needed to get out of my house and I needed to be outside. I needed to be with my friends. And so good friends, they really help you get through the hard time.
It's such an example of resourcing yourself when things are constrained. I felt like being in lockdown was very similar to grief. I was like, wow, I'm back in my pajamas on my couch alone. Like, this feels like grief. And for me, that came after my 2-year anniversary. And so I felt like it was a time when I wanted to kind of step out a little bit more, do some things. And all of a sudden it was like, nope, you're in your house and you're by yourself. And all the things that are part of your self-care, whether that's massage or, you know, dinner group with your friends, you can't have that anymore. And I can absolutely relate to the many people who experience suicidal ideation, depression, domestic violence, divorce went through the roof. There was just lots and lots of destruction that came from not having access to our support systems. And so the way that you stepped in and were like, I'm not going to be isolated. I'm going to bring my lawn chair and sit in someone's driveway so that
Right.
I can have this connection in this community. It's very tenacious of you, and I respect that.
It was so helpful. I mean, God knew. I don't know what I'd done if I couldn't have had friends like that said, hey, bring your lawn chair, we're getting together. And that's what we did.
Yeah, I have a friend who I can say, you know, and sometimes it's a plan and sometimes it's a last minute need to reach out. Can I come lay on your couch? I just don't want to be alone. I don't need you to be available for me. I know you're busy. You can put your kids to bed. I just don't want to be in a house by myself. Can I bring my children over and they can watch a movie and I can lay here and know that I have people who love me and I'm in their presence? And that's kind of like, you know, my base level of functioning, asking for help when I'm in that place. But to have people who are safe enough to ask that of, I think is the difference between resilience and getting stuck. And so when we invest in our community before we have loss, and we are ones who, you know, take casseroles and organize times to hang out and invite people for coffee or, you know, give gifts to one another, that is not to be selfish that, oh, well, when my time comes, now I have these people in place, but you truly have relationship established. And so you're not starting from scratch when you have a loss and trying to go to the door of some church and saying, I need you guys to show up for me. I know you've never met me before, but I'm in absolute catastrophic loss and I need a community. And so when we show up and are present for others, that just naturally has the outcome that they care about us and can be present for us when those are healthy relationships. Another one of the things that you have as a theme in your book that people ask me a lot about and are curious and just needing more resources is guiding children through the grief process. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it's not easy, is it?
1 star.
You know,
do not recommend.
I do not recommend either. I absolutely agree.
Goodness.
You know, every time I talk to somebody who asks me about this, you know, and watching my husband deteriorate and having to, you know, do everything for him was so overwhelming. And yet it was a piece of cake compared to single parenting. Single parenting has been the hardest thing in my entire life. It's exhausting. It's lonely.
Preach, Lori, preach.
You know, I mean, you can ask other people their advice, but at the end of the day, the burden is all on your shoulders. And I think as a single parent, like even divorced people can work together, but when you're widowed, there is nobody else. There is nobody else that you can talk to. So for a while, and I didn't do it perfectly, but I felt like, I've got 3 boys who need a man's opinion. So what would their dad do? And finally, my oldest son said, I don't need you to be both mom and dad. I just want you to be my mom, which was like
That's
really
very emotionally intelligent.
a gut punch kind of to me. Like God's not calling you to be Greg. And sure, you can think about what maybe he would do, but ultimately you're the one that's in this and I'm here with you. And when Greg was gone, I immediately put it back on God and said, look, you thought this was a good idea. And you thought
signed
that
off
I
on
could,
this. Yeah.
right? So you're not only going to have to just help me, but you're going to have to father my children. And I cannot even tell you, like, supernaturally how he will tell me things about my children before they're making huge mistakes. And he has shown up. I have just hundreds of real life examples, tangible things that God has done to help me parent my children. They still don't always follow. I have some that have really wavered in their faith because of the loss of their dad. And, what do you do with that? You're a single parent who really believes in the Lord and trusts him. And then you've got kids who are faltering in their faith. And so God has just been so good to me in even that, and showing me how I need to love my children through their difficulties. And, I've done counseling on my own. My kids have done some counseling. I think all of those things are important. But for me, the biggest thing has just been putting it back on God and saying, you've got to show up. And he hasn't disappointed.
I can't tell you how many things the Lord said to me just listening to you talk, that he hasn't asked me to be both Rachel and Micah, because I do feel that, it's, you become protector, provider, the speaker of identity, all of those things that come from the Father heart of God, right? And now it's, you're also the nurturer, the counselor, the comforter, which comes from the mothering heart of God. And you're supposed to do both. And
Right.
they're like not really friends. You know what I mean? They're kind of polar opposites in the strengths that you need to bring to the table, and to try to, pop off those hats off and on. And not only that, but take care of your home and, file your taxes and maybe get some sunshine or exercise and go grocery shopping.
Well, and I was facing, I had all new drivers that I had to teach to drive and help them buy cars, and how am I going to pay for college and all those things. Yeah, it's very, very stressful and difficult, and yet in each situation the Lord has shown up for me in maybe not the way I expected or wanted, but it's been good.
So I would love for you to coach me, as my kids are 11, they started 6th grade. And so we're doing junior high and changing classes and the social stuff and, full-time sports. Like, I just feel like we shifted into 5th gear. And, you talked about accepting comfort from others. And people often ask, what can I do for the person who is grieving? And so I would love to hear, like, for someone who would love to support a solo parent, whether that's a solo dad or solo mom, how can they come alongside of you practically as you're talking about, like, driving coaching? Like, I've thought many times, my husband was in law enforcement. And so all of our aunties and uncles in blue are defensive driving trained, right? Like, they've all, slid around the cones and done evasive maneuvers so that they can be effective police officers. So I'm like, I'm going to call you and you're going to train my kids how to drive, because I don't know that I have capacity for that. And that was totally going to be Micah. So what would you say, being a mom with older children, how would you encourage people to offer support to a solo parent that has older kids?
Well, let me just say, sixth grade is hell on earth every time.
Every time. Okay, that's affirming.
Every
I feel
time.
affirmed. Okay.
I'm sorry to say it, but all 4 times, sixth grade was just, but it gets better. It gets
Okay.
better from there.
Okay, thank you.
You can
Thank you.
do it. You can make it. But just know that's just a heads up. I have such great friends, and Greg and I happen to be friends with a lot of the girlfriends that I'm still friends with. And, I think in some ways it's very humbling to have to go to people or text them and say, hey, like my son is struggling. Could you please take him out for lunch? And for me, because I just like to do everything myself, like if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself, right? But I can't do it. I'm not a man. And I learned from my oldest, my job is to be the best mom I can be. So some of those men that have been in my kids' lives, I will text and say, hey, Zachary's really into golfing, but he's kind of struggling. And I won't necessarily get into the personals. I don't want to, tattle on my kids, but hey, would you mind asking him out to go to the golf range or hit some balls with him? Or, take him out to coffee, little things like that. I asked my brother, hey, Jake needs to talk about this. Can you talk with him? And then, people at church have sometimes offered to, just really mentor and guide my kids. For me, the hardest is my sons. Because I feel like they need that male influence in their lives, and I'm not it. So I had to come to a place where I was willing to humble myself and ask for the help and to accept help that maybe I wasn't expecting, and say, yeah, you're welcome to speak with them on that. But I also protect my kids from people too. So I think that there's a balance in there. Who do you want speaking into your child's life? And who do you want to
Absolutely.
protect them from?
Yeah, that's good. That's good because sometimes loss and trauma does draw people in who are subconsciously motivated by their own needs and not your kids' needs. And you, as a parent, have the discernment of when is this a healthy relationship and when is it something that I need to put some boundaries up around. That's so good. Sharon, when we were talking before we started recording, you mentioned honoring your husband's 3-year heaven birthday with having ice cream with your family. And in your devotions, you talk about celebrating the holidays and special events. So I'd love to hear how you've navigated some of those anniversaries.
Right. The anniversaries and the holidays, they're a challenge. The first anniversary of my husband's passing, I wanted to have everyone in my home. So it was about 24 of us because there are all the grands, and then
Mm-hmm.
I have little great grandchildren. And so I said, well, we're going to have pizza. I'm going to get pizza and make a salad. That my husband loved this particular pizza. So that's what I got because we were honoring him. And then I
Mm-hmm.
asked my son to bring, to put on the big TV, the pictures that had been shown at Don's memorial, at during the fellowship time. And so it was about probably at 45 minutes or so, just continual pictures and all these different things. And he put some other things in, some real fun things. And like I said, Don liked to have a good time. He's a good jokester. So he had some things like that. So we had times of laughter, we had times of tears and remembering. And it was just a great, glorious, my great room here was just filled, with the family. And at the end of that time, and it was the pictures were over and we all just kind of just sat there for a minute, and my little great grandson Peter, who loved his papa, I mean, he just adored him, he stood up, and he would have been 6, I think, maybe 5, and he stood up and he says, I want to pray. And it kind of took us all by surprise. And we said, Peter, do you want to pray? And he said, yes. He went up by the TV because now that's the stage,
Mm-hmm.
And so where he starts his prayer, and he just, in his little childlike way, thanked God for Papa and how much we love Papa and how we miss him. And then he said, please, God, please, please, please. I mean, he was just begging, don't let Papa forget us.
Oh.
And then we're all crying.
Wow.
So, we did that. Last year on the second one, we went to the baseball game because my husband loved baseball. So great big group of us went there. This year, we just did the ice cream thing, which was fun too. So, but holidays, I dreaded the first Thanksgiving. That was not easy. I did. Christmas was not easy. And Don and I always did the big Christmas Eve. And actually, my family still wanted to come here. This is tradition. So, I mean, the house was full, 26 maybe of us. And I had thought about it all day. Just, God help me, because I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I kind of felt like I wanted to say something, to the family. And God just took over. And I mean, Don was very orderly, how we gave gifts and how we did all this. And we had some little grates that got into the gifts while some of us were still eating. And it was so fun. We all gathered. Paper was flying everywhere. It was the biggest chaotic Christmas ever. And, we all laughed. We said, he wouldn't have known what to do, but we had so much fun. And so I just say, you know what, before these holidays, pray, because you never know. And just say, God, it's yours. I'm going to give it to you. Have it go the way you want it to go. And that's what I've just kind of learned to do from those first two. It's just, and sometimes you just have to do things differently. If you sit at the table, maybe don't sit at the table. Maybe put it outside if you live like we do in Arizona. Just maybe have to mix things up. Yeah, that's what I have done for the holidays.
That's good. That's good. I think taking stock of just getting quiet and what do I need? Do I need people? Do I need time alone? Do I want this to be more somber, or do I want it to be lighthearted? And do I need some of both? And I love how you put, pizza and time with family and those kind of things. And you also watched the memorial video, which it's relatively somber. It's powerful, but I know for our family, going back to that video that we played at Micah's memorial services is, that hits in the feels, right? And so, but it's also really beautiful, and you have all those fun pictures of things that they did and memories that made you laugh. And so being able to decide if you can tolerate, different things, or there'll be times that I find that other people have expectations, or my kids have needs in conflict with mine. And so then you have to really hash that out beforehand and see what you need. And I thought it was so beautiful this time. We celebrated my husband's birthday, and like you talk about being flexible, my husband loved Mexican, so we were going to go eat at his favorite restaurant and then have his favorite dessert. And that was our plan. Well, then my sister-in-law recently had a heart transplant, and she's not feeling safe germ-wise in public spaces. So that wasn't going to work. And we wanted to include the family in that. And then we were going to go to the park, and then it was raining, right? Like it was just like one thing after another kept shifting the potential options. And when I actually hit the grief day, the widow brain kind of resurfaces during the grief, where it's like, I can't problem solve and I don't know how to help myself. And so I called my friend and I was like, can you be my brain for me right now? Like, I don't know what to do. These are our restrictions and our needs. And we ended up going to Topgolf, which was like this indoor-outdoor hybrid. And Micah loved golf, and so we did something that reminded us of him, and we had all the littles with us too, and they could, do the little putt-putt, and so it needed that flexibility. It needed the playfulness, and something that still felt connected to who Micah was and the fun guy that he was. And then the family decided they wanted to go out to his grave and to sit with him and to honor their feelings in that way. And the twins and I were like, you know what? I think we want to diverge here and let them go do what feels good to their hearts. And we are going to go home and take naps and be grateful that we got to have those sweet memories of golfing. And so I love the echoes that I'm hearing in your story, and Dawn and Lori with your husband, Greg, that it's going to look different. You're going to grieve it differently. You're going to have different needs. Different holidays or anniversaries are going to bring up different grief points, which will need to be ministered to in different ways.
Right.
And so it sounds like you really thought through that and honored that in your devotional.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you said there, Rachel. And I ran across an amazing grief counselor. Her name is Jordan Early. And she was talking to a group of widows, and she said, you have permission to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we get in family situations, especially around holidays, anniversaries, those kinds of things, there's a lot of pressure, maybe expectation from in-laws or our own family or our children. And we as widows have to give ourselves permission to say no. That does not feel good to me at this time. Maybe try and explain, like, you guys can do what you want. I totally understand. But at this point where I'm at today, this is not in my comfort level. So I'm going to do this instead. And that was really freeing too, to give yourself grace, to allow yourself permission, the room to breathe, and not to feel like you have to jump through more hoops for your family or your in-laws, and to say, no, I'm going to protect my heart today. And that was such great advice.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thread to pull through. And I actually lived with my in-laws when Micah died, and we were looking for a house, and that was giving us the margin in a really crazy housing market here in Colorado Springs to not have to, offer $50,000 over asking, which is literally what some people have done. And so, we would come home, and it was like, okay, how is everybody's grief today? Taking the temperature for all these different people who are grieving the same person, but differently. And some people are having a good day, and some people are having a real bad day. And like, how do you, manage that with each other? And so there's probably a whole other book about how to grieve collectively and to not kill each other. Right?
That's true.
Because the conflict of needs is really meaningful. And when we're in pain, our way feels right.
So true.
And so it doesn't
true.
feel like anyone else's experience is valid except for ours. And pain is a navel gazer. Pain makes us selfish. We are concerned with our own wounds and needs, and that's just the nature of intense pain. And so
So true.
to see you guys work together and to write this book, I'm sure that this brought up some heated fellowship opportunities between the two of you, as relationships do. And so I love that you've allowed your grief to birth something beautiful in the midst of just the planting, right? In the dark and the dirt that is lost, and something beautiful has grown out of that. And hearing your stories and what you've created. And I love having another wonderful resource for people who have lost someone. And I just want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your stories.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having us.
I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you two are just lovely. I'm so glad that we found each other
I'm
across
glad
the
too.
internet in our stories.
Yes.
Lori, tell us where to find your podcast and your blog.
So you can find my blog at lorirohlinger.blogspot.com, and my podcast is called Beautifully Broken with Lori Rohlinger. So you can find that on any podcast. We do have a website called survivingwidowhood.net. You can find us there as well.
That's wonderful. And Sharon, tell us where to find your devotional.
Yes, you can find it on survivingwidowhood.net, or you can go to Redemption Press, who printed our book, or any place you buy your Christian books or books, you can get it there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I need to grab a copy of that. I'm guessing that would probably be a good intro gift for someone who has lost a spouse.
Very much.
That you want to be able to offer them something that isn't too meaty or too difficult in that immensity of the beginning. And it sounds like your book is a perfect fit for that need. So thank you so much for creating this. And everybody, please go check out their book and go listen to Beautifully Broken. I know that I'm going to go check that out for myself as well. And if this episode has blessed you or spoken to you in a meaningful way and you know a friend that would benefit, would you please share it to spread the message of hope and resilience? And would you please rate, review, and subscribe to the Hopecast? That helps increase the numbers and push it forward in analytics so that people can find it when they are in need of hope as well. Everybody, this has been the Hopecast with Rachael Flick, and I will connect with you next week.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachelflick.com. While you are there, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachelflick.com to book her today. While you're online, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review. To follow Rachael on social media, simply click on the social media icons at the top of the page and you will be directed to those sites. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.